Although the Muslim occupation of the Maltese islands lasted from 870 until 1091, the Muslim presence continued to be felt on the Maltese islands well into the late Middle Ages and even long afterwards. One of the most important legacies of the Muslim period is the Maltese language, and in terms of art and architecture, one feature that stemmed from the Arab world continued to be used until the 19th century: the mushrabiya. The mushrabiya reached the Maltese Islands because of the melting pot of cultures that took place in southern regions of Western Europe, and therefore the mushrabiya was an element that became characteristic of Mediterranean architecture. A mushrabiya is a projecting window made out of timber, but because of the lack of timber on the Maltese Islands, they were more commonly made out of stone. They would be ornamented with latticework in which there would be holes. It was, in Malta, one of the few architectural elements that articulated the otherwise bleak street elevations. The word mushrabiya or mushrafiya derives from the Arabic mushrabiya, that denotes drinking, sharba, probably because water would be placed in containers on the inside of the window, which would cool the air as wind passed through the holes of the mushrabiya. This made sense for the warmer months of the Mediterranean. If the mushrabiya was adequately placed on a house's facade, these holes would then be used by the inhabitants of the house to look out onto the street. This could therefore have also served for protection, but also some hypothesize because in the Islamic world a woman could not be seen unveiled by a male who was not a member of her family. This is a stone mushrabiya on an early modern building in Sijiri. St. John's Co-Cathedral is located at the center of Valletta. Built by the Knights of the Order of St. John after the Great Siege between 1572 and 1577, it is dedicated to the Order's patron saint, St. John the Baptist. Designed by Maltese architect and civil engineer Girolamo Cassar, it is built in the Mannerist tradition, with two bell towers on the facade that make it look fortress-like in appearance, which is fitting for a church built in a fortified city by a military religious order. The austere exterior contrasts greatly with the richly decorated interior, which is a tour de force of 17th century Baroque art. The interior is justly considered to be one of the finest Baroque in Europe, particularly that south of Rome. The interior was originally conceived to be quite modest, but the Calabrian painter Mattia Preti was engaged to redecorate the originally modest interior, painting the ceiling vault, altar paintings, and he also designed the carvings on the walls. The ornate marble floor is composed of tombs of knights made out of inlaid marble. Annexed to the cathedral is the oratory that was built in 1604. It contains Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio's largest painting, The Beheading of St. John the Baptist, which was painted in Malta in 1608 for this oratory. It is the only painting that the artist signed, with the signature featuring in the blood of the beheaded saint in the foreground. This is Le Gavroche, a bronze sculpture by Antonio Sciortino, Malta's foremost sculptor of the first half of the 20th century. Sciortino studied art at the School of Art in Valletta, and then proceeded to Rome to further his artistic studies on a government grant. He spent much of his life in Rome and even held the post of director of the British Academy of Rome between 1911 and 1936. A year later, he settled back in Malta, serving as the director of the National Museum of Art until his death. He was very much aware of the art that was being produced around him, particularly that of Auguste Rodin. Le Gavroche is an early masterpiece by Sciortino produced in Rome in 1904 when he was 24 years old. It was exhibited in Paris and in Rome, and then brought to Malta in 1907. It was placed on a plinth in Valletta's Upper Baracca Gardens and remained there until 2000, when it was removed for restoration. A replica was placed in its stead in the gardens, with the original now being placed in the National Museum of Fine Arts at Musa. This early work is linked to realism, even though the artist will later produce some futurist works, even though we cannot consider Sciortino to have been a futurist. Les Gavroches was inspired by Victor Hugo's 1862 Les Miserables. It portrays three street urchins, whose clothes are in tatters, as the older boy in the composition vigorously thrusts forward, pulling along the two younger boys. He is displaying grit, despite the unfortunate situation he finds himself in, showing the innocence and hope that is innate in children. The model that was used to cast the sculpture into bronze was presented by Prime Minister George Bush-Olivier to the then Princess Elizabeth when in Malta in 1951, and it is today housed in Buckingham Palace.